My name is Claire Bennett. I am 30 years old, and on the morning of my wedding, I discovered the velvet box on my dresser was empty. The 2-carat diamond ring, a family heirloom from Ethan's grandmother, had vanished without a trace. At first I told myself I must have misplaced it, that nerves were clouding my mind, but deep down I knew someone had taken it. Hours later, whispers spread through my guests about a video of my sister dressed in white smiling with her fiancé, a glittering diamond flashing on her hand. My parents brushed it off as nothing more than jealousy, telling me to let it go to protect the family name. But it was my ring, my day, my dignity, and their silence cut deeper than her betrayal. So I have to ask you, what would you do if the person meant to stand beside you as family chose to humiliate you instead, and the people you trusted most told you to stay quiet? Stay with me, because the way this story unfolds will leave you questioning what betrayal really costs and what justice truly looks like. And that morning, standing in my apartment, I saw the proof with my own eyes. For a moment I froze, staring into the empty box, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were telling me. I pulled out the drawers, checked under folded sweaters, even dropped to my knees to search the floor. Nothing. My heart pounded against my ribs and my palms were slick with sweat. That ring was not just jewelry. It was the symbol of Ethan choosing me, of our family's histories intertwining. Without it, I felt stripped, almost invisible. I rushed into the kitchen where Ethan was already making coffee, the smell of freshly ground beans drifting through the air. He looked up with that calm steadiness he always had, but the panic in my eyes made him put the mug down instantly. "The ring is gone," I blurted, my voice breaking. "I can't find it anywhere." He came over quickly, resting his hands on my shoulders. "Did you check the drawer, the jewelry box?" Of course I checked. I ripped everything apart. "It isn't there." My throat tightened as I whispered, "Ethan, someone took it." He paused, his jaw tightening. We both knew that ring didn't just vanish. It was too valuable, too sentimental, too guarded by me to simply slip away. He guided me to the couch, trying to calm me, but his eyes carried a flicker of suspicion that mirrored mine. "Claire, think. Who's been here in the last few days?" My mind scrambled, running through faces, neighbors, friends. Then it landed on one memory, sharp and unsettling. Last night, Madeline, my sister. She had stopped by unexpectedly. She said she wanted to drop off some fabric samples, something about making a scarf for Mom. She laughed, walked around the apartment, and at one point I saw her step into my bedroom. I remember calling after her, asking what she was doing. She brushed it off, said she was just admiring the window view. It seemed harmless at the time, but now the memory twisted inside me. Ethan read the change in my expression. "Who, Claire? Who was in there?" "Madeline," I whispered, almost choking on the name. "She was here last night." She went into the bedroom. "Only for a minute, but what if?" He leaned back slowly, his face hardening in a way I rarely saw. "Your sister." He wanted me to say it out loud to confirm the thought we both dreaded. I nodded, feeling my stomach churn. The room felt colder, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly louder. I could see the empty ring box still lying open on the coffee table, accusing me, daring me to confront the truth. I pressed my hands against my temples, fighting the wave of betrayal rising in my chest. Madeline had always been unpredictable, dramatic, but stealing my ring, our ring, was unthinkable. Yet the evidence was screaming in silence. She was the only one who had the chance. I stood pacing across the hardwood floor, each step echoing my restless thoughts. Ethan stayed seated, his calm presence steadying me even as my world spun. He finally said, "We will figure this out, Claire. Don't jump yet, but don't ignore what you know either." His words grounded me, but fear still clung to my skin. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and now I was standing in my living room staring at the possibility that my own sister had taken the one thing I could not replace. I tried to breathe, but every corner of the apartment suddenly felt suspicious, as if shadows were holding secrets I had overlooked. I pulled open cabinets in the bathroom, looked behind the laundry basket, even searched inside the fridge in desperation. I knew it was irrational, but panic made me frantic. I replayed last night again and again. Madeline walking in her eyes, roaming, her smiles stretched too wide. She had hugged me before leaving, and I remember feeling her hand brush against mine in an odd way. Could she have pocketed the ring? Then I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the small indentation on the dresser where the velvet box always sat. It had been there for weeks, a little shrine to the life I was about to start with Ethan. I remembered the night he slipped it onto my finger, how his hands trembled, how his grandmother's voice cracked with joy when she told me that the diamond had survived 2 generations of marriages. She said it had weathered wars, recessions, and heartbreak, and now it was my turn to guard it. And here I was the day before my wedding, failing that responsibility. Ethan sat beside me, his hand covering mine. "Claire, we will get it back. No matter what, we're still us. A ring doesn't change that." I nodded, but my chest ached. It did change things. Not between us, but between me and the people I thought I could trust. Family was supposed to stand beside you, not against you. I thought of the countless times Madeline had thrown little digs my way, her jealousy barely hidden. The time she called my engagement ring modest, the time she joked that Ethan must not have good taste because he chose me. They had seemed petty at the time, but now they painted a bigger, darker picture. I walked back to the living room, staring at the empty coffee table. The box was still open, its velvet interior mocking me. I imagined Madeline somewhere else, holding the ring, admiring how it sparkled against her hand. A sickness rose in me, not just anger, but sorrow. It wasn't just about the ring. It was about the possibility that my sister would take joy in ruining my moment. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each second, reminding me that time was moving forward whether I was ready or not. Tomorrow the guests would arrive, the flowers would be delivered, the music would play. Everyone would be watching, expecting to see a bride walking down the aisle with love shining in her eyes. And here I was, trapped in a storm of doubt and betrayal, wondering if I could face any of them, knowing what might have been stolen by my own blood. Ethan broke the silence, his voice steady but edged with steel. "We need to call her, Claire. Not accuse her, not yet. But see how she reacts." I swallowed hard, staring at my phone on the counter. My hands trembled as I reached for it, imagining her voice on the other end. Would she laugh it off, pretend she had no idea, or would there be a pause just long enough to confirm my fears? I didn't call, not yet. Instead, I placed the phone back down, unable to lift it to my ear. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. The morning sun was climbing higher, spilling golden light across the apartment, but it felt harsh, almost blinding. I closed the velvet box gently and slid it back onto the dresser, the absence inside heavier than any weight I had ever carried. And with that, I sat back on the couch, staring into the distance, knowing this was only the beginning of something far larger than I could yet see. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, my fingers hesitating over my mother's name. Nancy Bennett. Calling her had always been complicated. She was the kind of mother who answered quickly when it was about Madeline, but with me it was often half distracted or laced with quiet judgment. Still, she was my mother, and tomorrow was supposed to be my wedding day. I needed her to hear me, to believe me, maybe even to stand beside me in this. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was warm at first, cheerful, even as if she had been waiting for a pleasant call. "Claire, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Big day tomorrow." The words caught in my throat. "Mom, the ring. The diamond ring Ethan's grandmother gave us. It's gone. I think someone took it." There was a pause, but not the pause I expected. Not the shock or the worry, but something thin and dismissive. "Oh, honey, you probably just misplaced it. You've been stressed. Check your purse or the bathroom counter. I lose things all the time when I'm nervous." Her tone cut me deeper than I thought it would. I sat there, gripping the phone tighter. "Mom, I didn't misplace it. I know where I left it. I'm telling you, it was taken. Last night Madeline was here and she went into the bedroom. She's the only one who could have touched it." The line stayed quiet for a second, then her sigh came through, soft but loaded. "Claire, don't start this. It's your wedding. The last thing we need is drama between sisters. Madeline wouldn't do something like that. Just breathe and keep looking, you'll find it." I felt my jaw clench. The ease with which she dismissed me made me feel smaller, like a child again. I wanted her to fight for me to take my side just once. Instead, she was smoothing things over, protecting the peace, or maybe protecting Madeline. I swallowed down the lump in my throat and whispered, "You really don't believe me, do you? Sweetheart, it's not about believing, it's about not making problems where there are none. You'll thank me later for not blowing this out of proportion." I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands trembled as I set the phone on the table. Ethan had been watching me the whole time, his face darkening as he caught pieces of her tone. "She doesn't believe you, does she?" he said quietly. I shook my head, unable to speak. I wasn't ready to give up, so I scrolled down to my father's name. Richard Bennett. He rarely said much, but maybe he would hear me differently. The phone rang longer before he answered. His voice was tired, deep, the kind of voice that always sounded like it had already decided against me. "Claire, what is it?" "Dad, the ring is gone." "It's not misplaced. I think Madeline took it." "I need you to listen to me." There was silence on the other end, so heavy I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he exhaled, long and weary. "Claire, it's your wedding tomorrow. Don't do this. Your sister is already stressed enough. Just let it go." My chest burned. Let it go. That was always his answer. When Madeline got into trouble as a teenager, I was told to let it go. When she embarrassed me at family dinners, let it go. Now she had taken the most important symbol of my marriage, and he wanted me to do the same. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "Dad, it's not just a thing. It's Ethan's grandmother's ring. It means everything." He muttered something under his breath that I barely caught. "It's only a ring, Claire. Don't make this bigger than it is." And then the line went dead. The silence in the apartment was unbearable. I dropped the phone on the couch, feeling the betrayal sit heavy in my chest. Ethan reached for me, but I pulled away, pacing the room again. It wasn't just the missing ring now. It was the way my parents folded so easily, how they refused to see me, to hear me, to believe that I could be right about something when it came to Madeline. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did it anyway. I opened my messages and typed out a quick note to Madeline. "Did you take the ring? Please just tell me if you did." I stared at it for a second before hitting send. My heart hammered in my ears as I watched the screen, waiting. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her reply came through. "Don't be paranoid. Who would want that old thing anyway? Maybe check under your bed." I read it twice, anger rising like a flame in my chest. The words dripped with sarcasm, with that familiar sneer she always carried when she thought she was above me. Old thing. She knew exactly how valuable it was, not just in money, but in meaning. She knew this would cut me. Ethan stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. His arm tightened around my waist. "That's not denial," he said in a low voice. "That's mockery." I set the phone down on the counter, my hands shaking too much to keep holding it. My own sister was laughing at me, my parents were dismissing me, and tomorrow I was supposed to walk down the aisle, smiling as if everything was perfect. The betrayal pressed into my skin like ice. I wanted to scream, to shatter something, to make them all feel even a fraction of what I felt. Instead, I sank onto the floor, my knees pulling close to my chest. My mind kept circling back to the empty velvet box, to Madeline's laugh as she walked through my apartment last night, to my mother's sigh and my father's silence. Every detail piled on top of the other, each one confirming what I already knew. The apartment felt smaller, like the walls were pushing in. I leaned my head against the couch, trying to steady my breathing. Ethan crouched beside me, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You are not crazy, Claire. I believe you." His voice cracked slightly, but it was steady enough to anchor me in the middle of the storm. I wanted to believe his words were enough. But deep down I knew that the damage wasn't only about the ring. It was about a family that never chose me, a sister who thrived on taking what mattered most, and a wedding day now shadowed by doubt. I closed my eyes, holding onto Ethan's hand, and for the first time I realized this fight was going to be mine alone to carry. The day stretched ahead, the sounds of the city faint through the window, but inside the apartment, all I could hear was the echo of my mother's dismissal, my father's silence, and Madeline's cruel little smirk hidden in her words. I dragged myself into the office the next morning, my eyes still puffy from lack of sleep. The glass doors of Ventura Tech slid open, and the familiar hum of keyboards and chatter filled the air, but today, every sound felt sharper, more pointed, as if all of it was aimed at me. I set my bag down at my desk and tried to breathe normally, but I felt eyes flicking toward me then away just as quickly. Whispers moved faster than emails in this place, and I knew before I sat down that the story had already spread. Ana Lopez, who sat across the aisle from me, shot me a sympathetic look. She was one of the few people at work I trusted, someone who never joined in when the gossip started flying. I forced a small smile at her before opening my laptop, but the words around me kept slipping into my ears. "Did you hear?" someone whispered behind me. "She lost her wedding ring before the ceremony." A soft laugh followed, meaner than it needed to be. "If you can't keep track of that, how are you supposed to keep track of a marriage?" I froze at my desk, staring at the blank screen. The shame crawled up my neck until it burned my cheeks. I wanted to turn around to shout that it was stolen, not lost, that it wasn't my fault. But I knew how it would sound. Desperate, pathetic. Ana stood up and walked past their desks, shooting them a glare sharp enough to cut. The whispering stopped. She leaned down near me. "Ignore them. People will make up whatever story they want." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. By mid-morning, an email popped into my inbox from my manager, Mark Jensen. Subject line: "Can you step in?" My stomach dropped. It was never good when he wrote like that. I gathered my notebook and walked toward his office, every step heavier than the last. He was sitting behind his desk, his tie loosened like always, a coffee cup half full at his elbow. His smile was practiced, polite but distant. "Claire, thanks for coming in. Have a seat." I lowered myself into the chair, clutching the notebook to my chest. He leaned back, fingers steepled. "Look, I don't usually get involved in people's personal matters. But some of the chatter has been distracting this morning. And we have a very important client pitch next week. I need you sharp, no distractions." I blinked at him, struggling to keep my voice steady. "With all respect, Mark, this isn't just a personal matter. Someone stole my engagement ring. It's been devastating, but I'm still doing my job." He nodded, but his eyes flickered with something like impatience. "I understand, but perception matters. We don't want clients thinking our team can't handle pressure because someone's caught up in drama." His pause on the word stung. "So I'm drama now," I said softly. He cleared his throat and sat up straighter. "That's not what I meant. I'm just asking you to keep it together at the office. Handle whatever is going on outside these walls, but don't bring it in here." I left his office feeling smaller than when I went in. My ring wasn't just gone, my reputation was cracking too. It felt like no matter where I turned, people were ready to believe the worst version of me. Back at my desk, Ana wheeled her chair over until she was close enough that no one else could hear. "What happened?" she whispered. I told her in short, clipped words, each one weighted with frustration. How my mom brushed it off, how my dad avoided it, how Madeline mocked me, and now how Mark basically told me I was embarrassing the company. Her eyes darkened. "That's insane. You're the most reliable person here. If something's missing, I'd believe you before anyone else." I swallowed hard. Hearing someone finally say that made my chest ache. "Thank you, Ana. It feels like I'm losing my mind." She leaned closer, her voice steady. "You're not crazy. And you're not alone in this. If Madeline took it, there has to be a way to prove it. People always leave traces." Her certainty lit a spark in me. For the first time since the ring disappeared, I felt something stronger than fear. Determination. Ana touched my arm. "Tonight after work, let's sit down. I'll help you think this through. Maybe check where she's been posting what she's showing off. If she's flaunting it, we'll find it." I exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and gratitude. I had been drowning in silence, in disbelief, and suddenly here was someone offering me a lifeline. The rest of the day blurred by, each task at my computer more difficult than the last, as whispers still floated around the office. But instead of sinking into shame, I held on to Ana's words. There has to be a way to prove it. When the clock finally crept past 5, I packed my bag slowly, deliberately, no longer rushing to escape. As Anna caught my eye across the aisle, she gave me a small nod that steadied me. For the first time in days, I felt the tiniest pulse of control returning. I walked out of the building into the San Diego evening, the air tinged with salt from the harbor. The city buzzed around me, but my mind was quieter than it had been since the ring vanished. Maybe, just maybe, this fight was not mine alone anymore. That evening I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water in front of me, staring at the condensation dripping down the side, and my mind drifted back 2 years earlier. It was the spring of 2021 when Madeline had come knocking at my apartment door with her usual dramatic sighs and wide eyes, saying she had a brilliant business plan but needed a little help to get it off the ground. She called it a boutique, a luxury fashion shop on a quiet stretch in La Jolla. She had glossy sketches, mock-ups, and a voice that made everything sound inevitable. She swore she just needed $15,000, a short-term loan, and that with her vision and contacts, she would pay me back in 6 months at most. I remembered how I hesitated that night, sitting across from her as she waved papers in front of me. I had worked so hard to save that money, putting aside bonuses and extra shifts, building a cushion for emergencies. But Madeline leaned forward and whispered, "You're my sister Claire. If you don't believe in me, who will?" Something in me caved, the same soft part of me that had been taught since childhood to make space for her to step aside so she could shine. I wrote the check. By the end of the year, her boutique had folded. Rent, unpaid clothes, unsold racks empty. She stopped answering my texts about repayment. When she finally did, her words were curt, even offended. "Things didn't work out, Claire. You'll get it back when you get it back." Except I never did. The memory burned fresh as I sat through Sunday dinner at my parents' house that weekend. The table was set the way my mother always liked: heavy ceramic plates, candles flickering even though it was barely dusk. My father sat at the head, quiet as always, while my mother fussed over serving dishes. Madeline breezed in late, draped in a silk blouse I suspected she hadn't bought herself. Halfway through the meal, I gathered my courage and brought up the loan. "Mom, Dad, do you remember when Madeline borrowed $15,000 from me for her store?" The clatter of forks stopped. Madeline's eyes narrowed, a quick warning glance that said I was out of line. My mother frowned and waved her hand. "Claire, really, must we bring this up at dinner? That was a long time ago." "It wasn't that long," I said, my voice tight. "It's still money I worked for, money I never saw again." Madeline leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine like the queen of some private kingdom. "Oh, come on, Claire. You act like I robbed you. Businesses fail all the time. That's life." My father shifted, but his eyes stayed on his plate. He reached for his bread as if chewing could silence him. I pressed on. "You promised you'd pay me back. You haven't even acknowledged it." My mother's tone sharpened, cutting the air like a blade. "Your sister was struggling. Family helps family. You had the means. Why begrudge her that?" I felt my chest tighten, the familiar weight of unfairness pressing down again. It was the same script I had lived under since childhood. Madeline was the golden child, the one who deserved understanding, excuses, second chances. I was the steady one, the one who didn't need help, the one they could lean on without ever leaning back. I looked straight at Madeline. "You didn't just fail, you disappeared. And now my ring is missing. I can't help but wonder if you saw it as just another thing of mine you could take without asking." She laughed, then sharp and careless. "Don't flatter yourself. That ring wasn't even that impressive. Who would want something old and dated like that?" The words sliced through me. That ring wasn't just a diamond. It was Ethan's grandmother's, a symbol of a future I was supposed to be stepping into. Old and dated, she called it, as if erasing its meaning could erase my pain. I set my fork down carefully, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Maybe someone who owes me money. Someone who has always believed my things are theirs for the taking." Silence settled heavy over the table. My father cleared his throat, but he said nothing. My mother shook her head. "That's enough, Claire. Stop making accusations." Madeline smirked, twisting her napkin in her lap. "You really need to relax before your big day. No one stole your precious ring. Maybe you just misplaced it like everything else you lose." I wanted to shout, to slam my fist down, but I didn't. I swallowed the words, burning my tongue, knowing that if I erupted, they would only see me as hysterical, ungrateful, dramatic. Instead, I sat in silence as the plates were cleared, my appetite gone. But inside, the suspicion hardened into something heavier, something undeniable. She had the motive. She had the history. She had taken from me before and never once been held accountable. Later that night, back in my apartment, I paced the living room. The thought repeated like a drumbeat in my skull. She could have pawned it. Or she could be flaunting it, showing it off like a trophy the way she always had with anything that wasn't hers. The city outside glowed with neon and headlights, but I felt locked in my own small storm. Madeline's voice echoed in my head, that mocking tone, that careless laugh. Old and dated. My fists clenched. She thought she could reduce my ring, my love, my future to nothing more than a punchline. But she was wrong. This time, I wasn't letting it go. That night, Ethan sat beside me on the couch, the glow of his phone lighting his face in the dim room. He scrolled aimlessly at first, trying to distract me, until his expression suddenly stiffened. He leaned closer to the screen, thumb frozen above the glass. "Claire, look at this." I shifted beside him, my chest tightening as I glanced down. On Madeline's Instagram story, there it was, her hand lifted delicately, fingers curled around the stem of a wine glass. She had angled the shot so the sparkling backdrop of a yacht's deck blurred behind her, but what caught the eye was not the sea or the champagne. It was the diamond glinting at her finger. My breath caught. The light from the setting sun bounced against the stone in a way I knew too well. Ethan's grandmother's ring had a cut that made it sparkle sharp and clear, unlike the modern stones with their uniform fire. And on the side of the band, right where the metal curved, I saw it. A tiny scratch, thin but unmistakable. The one I had always noticed when I twisted it in the light. It was mine. I grabbed Ethan's phone, my hands trembling, and pinched the screen to zoom closer. My stomach twisted. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. She flaunted it in public, showing off to strangers like it was nothing more than an accessory. Ethan reached for the phone, his jaw tight. "I'll screenshot it. At least we'll have something." The camera shutter clicked as he saved it, then another, and another, making sure every angle of her smug little hand was preserved. I pressed my palms against my knees, trying to steady myself. "She didn't just take it," I whispered. "She's parading it. On a yacht like it's hers to flash around." Ethan placed his hand over mine, warm and steady. "That's not just cruel, that's theft. We have proof now. Claire, we should go to the police." The word police made my chest tighten further. Part of me wanted to march to the station that second, shove the screenshot at them, demand justice. But another part of me hesitated. My family. The storm it would unleash. My mother's inevitable defense of Madeline, my father's silence, the whispers from relatives who would see me as the one who dragged everything into the light. I met Ethan's eyes. I want to. God, I want to. But we need more. If I walk in there with just this, they'll find a way to twist it to say it's a lookalike ring or that I'm overreacting. He squeezed my hand. Then we get more. I swallowed hard, staring at the frozen image of Madeline's fingers wrapped around the glass. The ring caught the light, almost mocking me. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I said, my voice breaking. "It's not just that she stole it, it's that she knows what it means. She knows it belonged to your grandmother. She knows what it meant to me, and she's using it to humiliate me." Ethan's jaw flexed, his anger simmering under control. "She has always loved taking what isn't hers, but this time she picked the wrong thing. We'll gather whatever we need. Then we'll make sure she answers for it." I leaned into him, my head on his shoulder, but the comfort didn't reach the hollow ache in my chest. I felt exposed, like Madeline had stripped me bare in front of everyone. It wasn't only about the ring. It was about the years of being dismissed, belittled, treated like the afterthought. She had turned my engagement into her theater, her stage. Hours later, after Ethan had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room. I pulled the screenshot up again, staring at the tiny scar on the band. My thumb traced it on the glass like I could touch the metal itself. That scratch had always reminded me the ring had lived a life before me, carried love stories before mine. To see it now in her careless hand made me want to scream. Instead, I set the phone down carefully. If Madeline wanted to play games, I would play too. But I would not play to lose. The waves of San Diego's harbor echoed faintly through the open window. I imagined her on that yacht, laughing, clinking her glass, holding her stolen prize high as if daring me to come claim it. And maybe I would. For the first time since the ring had vanished, I felt something shift inside me. Not just grief, not just anger. A decision. If she thought I would crumble under shame, she was wrong. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would prove it step by step until there was no denying what she had done. The screenshot glowed faintly on the screen beside me, a single frame of evidence. It was not enough yet. But it was the beginning. The next morning I walked into the San Diego Police Department with the kind of tightness in my chest that made every breath shallow. The building smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper, and the low hum of voices carried through the hallways. I clutched a folder against me, stuffed with every document I could gather, the appraisal papers. Ethan's grandmother had kept the insurance certificate, photographs from the engagement party, and the screenshots Ethan had taken the night before. My palms were damp, but I forced myself to stand tall as the receptionist directed me to Detective Harris. He was a tall man in his 40s, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, and his tie slightly loosened as if he had already been at work for hours. His expression was calm but sharp, the kind of gaze that seemed to weigh every detail. He motioned for me to sit across from him in a small office with a metal desk and stacks of case files against the wall. "Tell me what happened, Miss Bennett." My voice shook at first as I explained, but the words soon poured out. I told him about the ring, about how it had belonged to Ethan's grandmother, how it was meant to symbolize our marriage. I described finding it missing on the morning of my wedding and how my sister had been in my apartment the night before. Finally, I slid the phone across the desk, the image of Madeline's hand holding the wine glass enlarged on the screen. "That's the ring," I whispered. "I know it is. The scratch here, this mark, I've seen it every day since Ethan proposed." Harris leaned closer, studying the photo. His eyes narrowed slightly, but his tone remained professional. "Do you have proof of ownership?" I nodded quickly and opened the folder, spreading the documents out on the desk. The appraisal dated back years with Ethan's grandmother's name. The insurance certificate listed Ethan and me as the current holders. Photos from the proposal showed the same ring on my finger. Harris shuffled through them, carefully nodding from time to time. "This is helpful," he said. "But here's the thing. For us to pursue this formally, we need more than a social media post. The ring could have been borrowed, or she could claim it's a different piece entirely." I felt heat rise in my face. "It's not different, it's mine. She took it from my apartment." "I understand," he replied evenly. "But the law requires more. Do you have anyone who saw her in your home around the time it went missing?" I thought back to that night, to Madeline standing in my bedroom with the excuse of needing to fix her makeup. I shook my head slowly. "She was there, but I can't prove she had the ring in her hand." "Then here's what we can do," Harris said, folding his hands on the desk. "We'll file a property loss report noting the value and your claim of theft. We'll need you to sign a sworn statement, and it would help to have Ethan do the same since it was his grandmother's. Beyond that, I suggest we monitor her public accounts. If she keeps flaunting it, we can establish a pattern. And if you can get a witness who saw her wearing it in person, that would strengthen the case." The hope that had carried me into the station began to falter under the weight of legal procedure. I nodded, pressing my lips together. "How long will this take?" I asked. "It depends," he said honestly. "Cases like this are often delicate, especially when family is involved. We can't simply knock on her door and demand it without cause." My hands tightened in my lap. "So in the meantime, she just gets to wear it to show it off, and I have to sit back and wait." Harris's voice softened slightly. "I know it's painful. But the process matters. If you want justice that holds, it has to be built carefully." I signed the paperwork with stiff fingers, the pen digging into the paper harder than I intended. Each stroke felt like I was giving away a piece of my privacy, exposing my family to scrutiny I had tried so long to avoid. When it was done, Harris handed me his card. "Call me if you find anything else. And keep your circle small. The more people you involve, the harder it gets to manage." I slipped the card into my purse and thanked him quietly. Walking back out into the bright sunlight of the city, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. At least I had taken action, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Ethan was waiting in the car across the street. The second I slid into the passenger seat, he searched my face. Well, I exhaled. They filed the report. He has the documents and the photo. But it's not enough. They need a witness or more proof. He said we have to keep watching her gathering evidence. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. That means she's out there walking around with it while we wait. I nodded, staring at the people crossing the street in front of us, each one living their day unaware that my world felt shattered. Back at the apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and thought of the wedding only days away. Guests flying in flowers, being arranged, tables set for celebration. I imagined the whispers if they knew. The glances, the pity, the judgment. No, I told myself firmly. They cannot know. Not yet. If I let this overshadow the wedding, it will stain everything. So I called the planner, checked on the schedules, smiled through conversations with friends, and hid the storm beneath my ribs. Outwardly, I was the bride preparing for her big day. Inside, every breath carried the taste of betrayal. That night, I lay awake, the ceiling fan circling lazily above me. My mind replayed Harris's calm instructions, his measured tone. Gather evidence. Stay quiet. Be patient. Patience had never felt so much like punishment. I turned on my side, pulling the blanket close, and whispered to myself in the dark. She thinks she's won. She thinks no one can touch her. But I will not let her walk away with it. The room was silent except for the hum of the city outside, and I finally closed my eyes, the decision solidifying within me. This was not over. The night before the wedding, I drove back to my parents' house in La Jolla, the familiar streets lined with palm trees glowing under soft yellow streetlights. My stomach was twisted tight, not from nerves about the ceremony, but from the weight of everything unspoken. The house looked the same as it always had, its stucco walls bathed in the warm glow of the porch light, but I felt like I was walking into a stage set, everyone playing their roles, each line rehearsed. Nancy greeted me at the door with a smile that looked more like a mask. She kissed my cheek quickly and said how lovely tomorrow would be, her voice pitched too high, too bright. Richard stood behind her in the hallway, hands in his pockets, eyes dropping to the floor the second mine met his. His silence was nothing new. At the dining table, the smell of roast chicken and garlic bread filled the air. Everything was arranged perfectly, as if the dinner itself could hold us all together. I sat down, trying to steady my breath, when the front door opened without a knock. Madeline stepped inside, heels clicking against the tile. She was wearing a white sundress, casual but deliberate, like she had chosen it to blur the line between mockery and innocence. She tossed her purse onto the counter and walked straight to the table, sliding into the chair across from me as if she owned the place. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The only sound was the clinking of silverware as Nancy fussed over pouring wine and setting extra napkins. I forced myself to focus on my plate, cutting the chicken into small pieces, waiting. But Madeline was never one to leave silence untouched. "So big day tomorrow," she said with a smirk. "Must be exciting, all eyes on you for once." My jaw tightened. I kept my tone even. It would be more exciting if my engagement ring hadn't gone missing. Her smile spread slowly, like she had been waiting for me to say it. She leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine glass. "Oh, that old thing I heard, you've been accusing people left and right." I set my fork down carefully. "No accusations, just facts. It disappeared the same night you visited my apartment." Her eyes flashed, but instead of denial, she tilted her head and laughed softly. "Maybe it suits me better. You've always had everything, Claire. The good grades, the job, the fiancé. Why shouldn't I have one thing that shines?" The words cut sharper than I expected, like a blade sliding between ribs. My breath caught, but I didn't let it show. Across the table, Nancy's eyes widened and she reached for Madeline's hand. "That's enough, Maddie. This is not the time." Madeline shrugged her off. "I'm just saying the truth. Some of us have to fight for scraps, while others are handed everything on a silver platter." I looked at Richard, hoping for some kind of acknowledgement, but he kept his eyes fixed on his plate, chewing slowly as if the food demanded his full attention. The air around us thickened, the sound of the clock ticking in the corner louder than it should have been. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists on the table, to demand the ring back then and there. But instead I folded my napkin neatly in my lap and stared directly at Madeline. "You think that ring makes you stronger," I said quietly. "But it doesn't. It just shows who you really are." Her smirk faltered for half a second, and then she scoffed, taking another sip of wine. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." Nancy stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "That's it. Enough about rings and fights. Tomorrow is about joy, about family. Can we not ruin it with this nonsense?" The word nonsense lodged in my chest like a stone. I swallowed it down, pressing my nails into the fabric of my napkin. Madeline leaned forward, her voice low but sharp. "You can play the perfect bride all you want, Claire, but deep down you know it. That ring looks better on me." I memorized every word, every flicker of her expression, locking them away in my mind. Evidence. Proof of intent. The law might need more than a photograph, but they could not deny a pattern of arrogance, a trail of statements she could never take back. The rest of the meal unfolded in stiff silence, Nancy trying desperately to chatter about flowers and seating arrangements. Richard nodding absently, Madeline sipping her wine like she had already won, and me sitting still, my spine rigid, repeating her words in my head until they were etched in stone. When the plates were cleared and the night wound down, I excused myself, politely thanking Nancy for dinner, hugging Richard out of habit, though his arms barely moved. Madeline stood by the counter, swirling the last of her wine, watching me with a smirk that never touched her eyes. I walked out into the night, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine from the garden, my heels crunching on the gravel path. My hands trembled as I reached the car, not from fear, but from restraint. Every part of me burned to fight back, to shout her down in front of everyone. But not tonight. Tonight I gathered her words like stones, ready to build the case brick by brick. Tomorrow the world would be watching me in white. Tonight I would carry her confession in silence, knowing that soon it would matter more than she could imagine. The morning light spilled through the curtains of my hotel room, soft and golden, the kind of light that should have felt like a blessing. Instead, it pressed against me like a reminder, whispering that today was the day I was supposed to feel whole, and yet I was missing something that could never be replaced. My wedding gown hung near the window. Ivory silk glowing against the sun, every seam a testament to months of planning, yet my eyes kept drifting to the bare skin of my finger. Ethan knocked gently before stepping in, his tuxedo crisp, his smile calm in a way that always steadied me. He kissed my cheek and held my hands in his, squeezing them lightly. "You look perfect," he said, but I shook my head. "It doesn't feel perfect. Not without the ring." He brushed his thumb across my knuckles, his voice steady and warm. "The ring is just metal and stone, Claire. You are the person I choose, not a piece of jewelry. What matters is us." My throat tightened, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I wanted to believe him, to let the comfort sink deep into me, but a part of me couldn't stop thinking of that band of diamond and gold sitting somewhere it did not belong. I nodded anyway, because I didn't want to weigh him down with the heaviness that pressed against my chest. The drive to La Jolla Garden venue was short, the ocean breeze following us down the coastal roads, carrying the scent of salt and blooming bougainvillea. The venue itself was tucked behind wrought iron gates opening into a courtyard framed by palm trees and white roses. Guests milled around in pastel dresses and dark suits, their voices a gentle murmur over the sound of a string quartet tuning their instruments. Inside the bridal suite, I stood before the mirror while Anna adjusted the veil at the crown of my head. Her eyes met mine in the reflection, kind and unwavering. "You've got this," she whispered. "No one is looking at your hand. They're looking at you." The music began before I could respond, the soft swell of strings flowing through the open doors. My heart raced as the coordinator peeked inside, motioning that it was time. When I stepped onto the path lined with white petals, the air shifted. Every head turned, the sunlight catching on the glass vases that shimmered along the aisle. 30 guests rose quietly to their feet. Some I had known for years, some were Ethan's family, some were neighbors who had watched us grow up. Their faces blurred as my eyes locked onto Ethan at the altar, his smile steady, his posture unshaken. The words of the officiant washed over me like waves, phrases of love and commitment, the promise of forever. I repeated my vows with trembling hands, the words catching in my throat but finding their way out all the same. Ethan's voice was strong and sure, each sentence like an anchor grounding me in place. When it came time for the rings, Ethan slid a simple gold band onto my finger, a placeholder we had chosen the night before. My chest ached at the absence of the diamond, but when I looked into his eyes, something in me softened. He kissed my hand as if sealing a pact, his lips warm against my skin. Applause broke through the air as we were pronounced husband and wife, the string quartet swelling into song. The crowd rose, clapping and cheering, and for a moment, I let myself feel it, the lightness, the possibility of joy. I smiled as we walked down the aisle together, flower petals fluttering in the air like confetti. The reception hall was glowing with soft lights, the tables draped in ivory linens and scattered with candles. Glasses clinked as servers moved between guests, laughter building in the corners of the room. I held Ethan's arm tightly, my smile painted on, but deep in my chest a hollow space remained. We were about to step through the double doors, ready to greet everyone as husband and wife, when a ripple passed through the crowd. It started as a murmur, then grew into a wave of whispers, phones being pulled from pockets, eyes darting from screen to screen. Anna hurried toward me, her face pale, her phone held tightly in her hand. "Claire, you need to see this," she said, her voice low and urgent. The music faded behind me as my stomach dropped, every nerve in my body tightening. Guests leaned into one another, showing each other the same glowing image, the same short clip looping again and again. I hadn't seen it yet, but I felt it in my bones, the unmistakable dread of a truth too bold to be ignored. Whatever it was, it had shattered the brief illusion of peace, pulling every gaze away from the celebration and fixing it on something else entirely. I reached for Anna's phone, my hands trembling, the edges of the screen blurring in my vision. Whatever waited for me there, I knew it would not let me walk back into that reception the same way. Anna's phone lit up in my hand, the video already rolling before I could steady my breath. The first image was sunlight bouncing off deep blue water, the kind of day you only see on glossy travel magazines. Then the camera panned, and there she was. Madeline perched on the deck of a gleaming yacht in Newport Beach, her hair curled and perfect, her skin glowing against a white sundress that looked far too much like a mockery of mine. She lifted a champagne flute, laughter spilling out as if the world had never given her a reason to frown. But my eyes were not on her face. They locked on her hand, raised high with a deliberate flick of her wrist. The diamond caught the light, refracting in sharp, cruel sparks. Even blurred by the phone's resolution, I knew every curve of that stone, the way the gold band had a faint scratch on its edge. It was my grandmother's ring. It was mine. Across the screen glowed the caption in bold letters, "Future looks brighter than ever." The words cut like glass. My knees threatened to buckle, and, for a second, the music of the reception behind me blurred into static. Ethan's hand closed over mine, steady, grounding, but I could feel the tension in his body too. He saw it. He knew. A murmur grew louder among the guests, no longer contained to whispers at the tables. People gathered in small clusters, phones out, showing each other the same clip. I caught fragments of their words as they drifted toward me. "Isn't that Claire's ring? Looks just like it. Oh my God, is that her sister?" On Logan Pierce's yacht, the name made my stomach lurch. Logan Pierce, San Diego's golden boy venture capitalist and son of one of the wealthiest families in Orange County. His parties were practically news events, and his yacht was recognizable even in grainy footage. Madeline had not only stolen my ring but flaunted it at the most public stage she could find. I tried to move, but my feet felt stuck, as if the polished floor beneath me had turned to tar. Every eye in the room seemed to flicker toward me, then back to their phones. The joy of the ceremony evaporated into a cloud of speculation and pity. Anna's face was pale, her lips pressed tight. "Claire, I am so sorry," she whispered, but even her sympathy felt like another weight I could not carry. Ethan leaned close, his voice firm in my ear. "Don't let them see you break. She wants this, Claire. She wants to take today from you." I nodded faintly, though I wasn't sure my body could obey. My chest ached, anger and humiliation tangling together until I could hardly breathe. I had imagined many ways this nightmare could unfold, but not like this, not with every guest watching as if my pain was the entertainment. Someone near the back of the room lifted their phone higher, angling it so a circle of guests could see. The image of Madeline's laughing face and that diamond-studded hand grew larger, brighter, a cruel beacon in the dimmed light of the hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman in a blue dress shook her head, muttering that it was disgraceful. A man in Ethan's extended family crossed his arms, looking toward me as if waiting for confirmation. Ethan's grip tightened on my hand, but it wasn't enough to stop the flush rising hot across my skin. My humiliation was no longer private. It had become the centerpiece of my own wedding. I forced myself to breathe, to stand taller, though inside I felt gutted. My voice barely rose above a whisper, but I managed to say to Ethan, "She planned this. She wanted me to see it today." He exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. "Then, let's make sure she doesn't get the ending she expects." The chatter swelled again as another guest played the clip aloud, Madeline's laughter spilling into the reception hall like a ghost that refused to be banished. The sound made my stomach turn, mocking and victorious, as though she had already won. I looked at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some curious, some hungry for gossip. My family, sitting stiffly at one of the front tables, avoided my eyes. My mother dabbed at her forehead with a napkin, pretending to be busy. My father stared at his glass of wine. Neither of them moved to stop the whispers. I wanted to scream, to shout her name, to rip the phones from their hands. Instead, I stood frozen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The video looped again, the diamond flashing brighter each time, as if reminding me of everything I had lost and everything she had taken. My throat burned, but I refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them. One thought repeated itself, cold and sharp. She will not get away with this. I turned toward Ethan, my voice steady for the first time all night. We need more than outrage. We need to be ready. He met my eyes, his expression fierce, as if he had been waiting for me to say it. "We will be," he said, and for the first time since the clip began, I felt the faintest flicker of strength return. But the room was still buzzing, the humiliation still raw. I could not escape the feeling that every smile, every toast that would follow would be laced with the memory of this moment. The night I was supposed to be celebrated had become the night my sister claimed my place in the cruelest way possible. I straightened my shoulders, the sound of Madeline's laughter still echoing from someone's phone across the room, and I knew this was only the beginning of a storm that would not pass quietly. Out on the open water, the video that had humiliated me was playing in real time, only without the filters or the cheerful music laid over it. Logan Pierce leaned against the rail of his yacht, his eyes narrowing at the sparkle on Madeline's finger. At first he had been proud, showing her off to his wealthy friends, letting them admire what he thought was an extravagant gift or a family heirloom. But it didn't take long for a quiet word from one of his guests to reach him. Someone had seen the online chatter, the comments already circulating about the ring, the police involvement, the paperwork that could trace it back to me. The shift in his expression was sharp, like a cloud cutting across the sun. He turned toward Madeline, who was laughing with a group near the bar, and his voice carried over the music. "Where did you get that ring?" She blinked at him, caught off guard, then tilted her chin up with the same defiance she had used on me at the dinner table. "You gave it to me, remember?" His jaw tightened. "Don't play games. People are saying it belongs to your sister." The crowd hushed a little, curious eyes turning toward them. Madeline's smile faltered, then snapped back into place, brittle and forced. She waved a hand as if brushing away dust. "Claire is delusional. She's jealous, that's all." Logan's voice grew louder, sharper. "There's paperwork, Madeline. Certification. The police have it. Did you steal it?" The question cut through the music, through the laughter, through the entire night. Heads turned. A girl holding her phone halfway to her face stopped recording mid-sentence. Madeline's cheeks flushed deep red. She shook her head quickly, but the denial didn't sound steady. "No, of course not, why would I? It's mine now. Now." That word was her mistake. Logan's friends murmured, the kind of murmurs that signaled judgment, the kind that spread like wildfire through their circles. Logan slammed his glass down on the nearest table, liquid splashing across the teak. His voice cracked with fury. I don't tolerate liars. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You think you can drag me into some petty family theft? Madeline's voice rose to meet his shrill and panicked. Don't talk to me like that, Logan. You wanted me here. You wanted me on this boat. You said I deserved everything. He shook his head, already backing away, the disgust plain on his face. I wanted a partner, not a thief. She reached for him, desperation clawing into her movements, but he pulled away, his hand up as if her touch might burn him. Enough. It's over. The engagement is done. Gasps swept across the deck. Someone actually clapped a hand over their mouth. Another person pulled out their phone, already typing furiously, eager to be the first to send the story out. Madeline froze, her chest rising and falling fast, her face twisting between fury and disbelief. Logan turned, muttered something to his crew, and within minutes, a smaller boat was pulling up alongside, ready to take him ashore. He didn't look back. On land, the news traveled faster than the tide. By the time the last of the vows had been toasted at my reception, whispers had become shouts. Logan left her. He called off the wedding. She lied about the ring. I heard it from the corner of the hall, where two cousins of Ethan's were huddled over a phone, their eyes wide. They weren't the only ones. Guests leaned in, passing the story like contraband, their voices a mix of shock and thinly veiled satisfaction. I sat at the head table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, Ethan's hand steady on my shoulder. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. But a flicker of something sharp and undeniable curled in my chest. Madeline's laughter, the sound that had haunted my ceremony, was being replaced by another image altogether. Not her winning, not her flaunting, but her unraveling. The crowd at my wedding shifted, no longer whispering about me, no longer pitying me. Their attention had swung, pulled toward the chaos spilling out of Newport Beach and into every corner of the internet. Ethan leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. Karma moves fast sometimes. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the noise of the hall wash over me. The sting of humiliation hadn't vanished, but it was dulled by the knowledge that Madeline's perfect act had already begun to crumble. The storm had shifted direction, and for the first time that day, it was no longer only mine to carry. My phone buzzed against the linen of my gown, tucked discreetly beside me at the reception table. For a second, I thought it was another alert from social media, another ping announcing my sister's downfall, spreading faster than wildfire. But when I saw the number, my breath caught. It was Detective Harris. I excused myself quietly and stepped into the hall, the muted hum of the reception fading behind me. The detective's voice was steady, calm, but carrying the weight of finality. Claire, we've recovered the ring. It has been secured and logged as evidence. Once the paperwork is complete, it will be returned to you. The words knocked something loose inside me, like a chain breaking after years of pressure. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall, my hand pressed over my chest. Relief surged through me, so strong, I felt lightheaded. Thank you. I whispered, not just to him, but to the universe, to anyone who would listen. He continued explaining the procedure. It would take a little time. The chain of custody had to be honored. Reports had to be filed, but the ring was mine again in the eyes of the law. Madeline's time pretending was over. When I hung up, the phone felt warm in my hand, like it carried the glow of justice itself. Back inside, the reception buzzed with whispers. People scrolled on their screens, heads bent together, eyes flicking toward me as if I were both victim and victor. Ethan stood when he saw me return, his brow furrowed with concern until he caught the faint smile on my lips. I told him in a low voice. The police have it. It's done. His shoulders relaxed, and for the first time all day he laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes from deep relief. Not long after, another vibration rattled my phone. This time it was my mother. I stared at the screen, the name glowing in sharp letters. For a moment I considered silencing it, but then I pressed accept. Her voice rushed through thick with urgency. Claire, please don't drag this any further. She's your sister. Think about the family, think about the embarrassment. I let her words wash over me, the same rhythm I had heard my entire life, excuses, layered on top of excuses, pleas for peace that always meant my silence. My hand tightened around the phone, but my voice came out even calm, unshakable. Mom, I've been quiet too long. This time I won't protect her lies. There was a pause, heavy like she hadn't expected me to push back. Then her voice cracked, smaller, pleading. She'll lose everything. I answered without hesitation. She chose this. I didn't. I ended the call before the cycle of guilt could wind tighter around me. When I looked up, Ethan was watching from across the room, his gaze steady, his presence like an anchor. I crossed to him, and he took my hand without a word. The guests were still murmuring, but their voices blurred into the background. All I felt was the warmth of Ethan's fingers interlacing with mine. For so long, I had tied my worth to objects, to approval, to the fragile hope that one day my family would see me. Now, standing there with the man who chose me, who believed in me, even when the ring was gone, I understood something deeper. He leaned closer, whispering against the noise. You are what matters, not the diamond, not any of it. My throat tightened and I nodded, squeezing his hand back. The weight on my shoulders, the years of being overlooked, diminished, dismissed, began to lift. For the first time, I felt the truth of it. The love between us was stronger than any stone, stronger than any betrayal. I exhaled slowly, the breath steady, almost cleansing. Around me the reception pulsed with chatter and laughter, some still circling Madeline's downfall, some already drifting back to celebration. But in that moment, all I needed was the man beside me and the quiet strength that filled the space between our hands. The night wasn't over, but the fear that had clung to me for days was gone. In its place was something firmer, something unshakable. And as I looked at Ethan, I knew we were standing on the edge of a future no one could take from us. The music drifted softly from the speakers as the reception carried on, and the glow of string lights above the garden cast everything in a warm, golden haze. Ethan held me close on the dance floor, his hand steady at my back, guiding me through the rhythm of a song I barely registered. For the first time in days, maybe even years, I was not thinking about what had been stolen from me. I was thinking about what I still had, what was mine by choice and not by chance. Guests circled us, some swaying to the music, some talking in hushed voices that rose and fell like waves. I caught snippets about Madeline, her name whispered like a cautionary tale, but it no longer pierced me the way it once would have. Instead, I let myself focus on Ethan, his smile, the warmth of his chest against mine, the promise in his eyes. When the song ended, applause rippled softly across the room. Ethan kissed my forehead and whispered that he loved me, his words so simple yet stronger than any vow we had just spoken. I felt tears burn the corners of my eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming relief that I had survived the storm and come out whole. We sat for dinner under the string lights, the tables filled with laughter again, though now it felt different. People glanced at me with respect, with sympathy, even admiration. No one dared say Madeline's name too loudly anymore. It was as if the ring, the scandal, the drama had burned itself into the background, leaving behind only the truth that could not be erased. My father sat at the far end of the table, quiet, his fork pushing food he barely touched. My mother smiled politely, but her eyes were clouded as though she had aged years in just a day. They knew now that their silence had consequences, that the child they had once treated as expendable had found a voice that could no longer be ignored. When the cake was cut, when champagne glasses clinked, I found myself laughing without forcing it. The weight was gone. The humiliation had been burned away. What was left was joy, unshakable and clear. Ethan leaned close, whispering again that this was our real wedding, not the one ruined by theft and betrayal, but the one saved by resilience. Later, as the night air cooled and the last guests lingered near the garden's edge, I walked alone for a moment beneath the lights. My dress brushed softly across the grass and the faint scent of jasmine filled the air. I thought about Madeline, about the image of her laughing on that yacht with someone else's love glittering on her hand. I thought about how quickly it all crumbled for her, how silence had turned to shame. She vanished from social media the next morning, her accounts locked, her posts gone. Logan was nowhere in sight, and word traveled fast that the engagement had been called off entirely. My mother tried again to reach out, but this time she had no demands, only a weary sigh and silence. My father never said a word. For me, there was no triumph in her downfall, no victory dance in her ruin. Only a quiet satisfaction that justice had been done, that the truth had won without me having to raise my voice above a whisper. Ethan came to find me under the lights, his hand slipping into mine again, steady and sure. He asked me what I was thinking, and I told him honestly that love is never measured in diamonds or in approval from people who cannot see your worth. That justice, though sometimes slow, is always worth waiting for. That I was finally free to live my life without apology. He kissed me then with all the softness and certainty of a man who had chosen me long before a ring could symbolize it. And in that kiss I found everything I needed, more than I had ever hoped for. By the time the last song played and the final toast was given, I knew our wedding would be remembered not for the scandal but for the way it endured through it. Not for what was stolen, but for what remained. And as I looked around at the glowing garden, at the guests who had stayed, at the man whose hand never let go of mine, I knew I had given myself the greatest gift of all. The courage to speak, the strength to stand, and the wisdom to finally let go of everything that had tried to break me. Now I want to turn to you. Have you ever had to step away from family to protect your own peace, to stand your ground even when it meant losing the people closest to you? Share your story in the comments. And if my journey has resonated with you, subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the next story we tell together.